it really changes your motivation. It really changes the ideas you have. It really changes your feeling of satisfaction when you get a piece of content out into the world, when you have this really clear, detailed image in your mind of the person you're serving and the problem that that person has. Because from then on, your whole job is just to solve that problem for them.
Really want to show a path for people to be like, okay, how do I actually connect the content to the profit of my business and different things? So you've been creating for so long.
The show we run these days is called Podcraft, which is about how to run a podcast. That's been going, what's that, 16 years? That's a bit mental. But anyway, that...
What process do you have in place to stay consistent for so long?
Every 3, 6, 12 months, you can redefine your audience. You can change it a bit. You'll carry along a good proportion of the people that have been listening already. You might lose a few, but that's fine because you're changing, you're iterating, you're growing. But the worst thing is not to do it at all. You need to actually just do it and then kind of iterate from there.
Guys, we are very excited to bring this person today. We actually met him in the halls of like this incredible event. Fonzie's like, do you know who that is? And I'm like, I don't know who that is, but you know who that is? And he's like, yes, I know who that is. Of course, that's why I'm asking you. So anyways, we chatted for a little bit and I'm like, we need to have this conversation on the show. And then finally we got to get him in here and he was kind enough to come. But this person has hit nearly 3 million yearly views on their blog. They are building and launching Alitu as a software product, which we'll talk a little bit more about it. He has been creating content for 14 years straight. We talk about consistency.
Wow.
Every single episode over here, we'll dive into it and obviously build $1 million business and many more amazing things. And I know Fonzie has some questions that he hasn't told me yet. But guys,
I'm excited.
He's also located in a unique part of the world that we hope to visit at some point. We bonded over that. But guys, please welcome the one and only
Colin Gray. What's up, Colin?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. What an intro, best intro ever, I have to say.
I appreciate that. Energy, mistakes and everything.
Energy trumps mistakes. That's the lesson that we can.
That's it.
Dude, Colin, I'm so excited. I want to lead with a fun story. And I want to start this episode. And I hope it's not embarrassing, but I thought it was a fun story.
Oh,
the day we met, I don't know if you remember this. The day we met, we were at Podfest. And we were actually doing like a little, I don't know how to call it, like a little round table, round circle thing. We were standing up, so there were no tables. So I don't know if to call it a round table. But, we're introducing ourselves and we're like, yeah, we're Luis and Luis, the Biz Bros. And a few minutes later, you come to us and you're like, hey, man, what's up? How are you doing? It's like, dude, I knew Biz Bros sounds familiar. I was like, I've been on your podcast. And I went into crisis mode. I was like, oh my gosh, like, have you? I don't remember you. I'm so sorry. Dude, Colin, I was so embarrassed. And you're like, oh, it's okay. You guys have done a lot of episodes. I was like, there's no way. There's no way I can remember. So I started looking into a database, of people that we've interviewed. I was like, Colin, no, there's no Colin here. Gray, maybe, no. And then all of a sudden, something sparked in my head. A while back, I had, when we were looking for the domains, we discovered that there's actually some other Biz Bros out there, right? First of all, we need to... Fake Biz Bros. No, I'm kidding. But there were other Biz Bros out there, right? And turns out you had actually been on their podcast. Yeah. And you're like, oh, dude, like... obviously, I would have made the same. I would have probably said the same thing. I was like, dude, I've been on the podcast with Biz Bros. So after that, I took that personally as a mission. I'm like, you know what? We're going to show Colin who the real Biz Bros are. Colin, you're invited to the show. And, it was absolutely amazing. So sorry if it was a little embarrassing of a story. I just thought it was funny.
No, not at all. I even remember, I was like, these guys, why don't they remember me? This is terrible. So I was like looking at my email. I was on my email, like searching Biz Bros. And I was like, oh, yeah, there is. He's invited. Here's the conversation. I think I brought my phone over to you and said,
yeah, you did.
Here's the invite. And I was like, that's not me.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
That's probably like the worst fear that we had, when like not remembering anybody that came into the show. We're like, there's no way.
There's no way I would feel. But it was funny because I remember you showing me the email and it was like an assistant. And I was like, we don't have an assistant. I was like, well, maybe, you know, but yeah, man, it was awesome. Yeah. It was honestly a good kind of like, I don't know how to call it, because I don't think it was a mistake, you know, but it was like a good thing to happen, because I feel like we bonded over that. And then throughout the event,
icebreaker.
Yeah, good icebreaker. Throughout the event, we kept seeing each other. We're like, hey, Colin, what's up?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I know. Do you think that you guys remember everyone you've had in the show? Because you've done hundreds of episodes, haven't you?
Yeah.
I often meet. This is bad for me. Like I'm just really bad for remembering faces and names, and it's it does embarrass me sometimes, because I do exactly what you thought you'd done but hadn't, obviously, and get people come up to me and say, "Oh, hi, how are you getting on?" And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Try to like glance down at the name tag.
Yeah.
And it's terrible. I really need to figure out how to get better at it, but I've done that. Too many times.
Well, you've also been doing it for 14 years, you know, so that is way longer than, you know, if I meet somebody from year one and I don't see them in 10 years and then they come up, like, there's a big chance I'm not gonna recognize who that person is, right?
That's definitely a big fear, and like something that we actually talk in the community a lot is like, especially when we want to develop relationships, right? We were just talking about this incredible event that we were in the last couple of days, which is like based on relationships and referrals, and it's like, wow, what if I forget, right? And I think it's like part of it is the uniqueness of the conversations that we have, or the process, right? We met you at the event, now we're talking here, there's probably gonna be some more talks later, right? And we associate, you know, you're up in Scotland, right? It's like, oh, we talked about this a lot, and we're like, you know, we're gonna go watch some football over there, and when we go visit you. So there's like all these things that kind of link up to that. I think top of mind, obviously, I don't think I can list like all 500 people.
Oh yeah,
but you know, if we go to an event, I'm sure like we can recognize, because, you know, it is really a meaningful interaction that we have. And that's something that, you know, we encourage everybody to do. It's not just a transactional conversation. Like, this is actually, hopefully, if you accept us into your life, we're going to be some kind of, you know, partners or referrals or different things, that not only in business, but also friends, right? That eventually, you know, if we go there to Scotland, we'll give you a call and be like, hey, we're here. Surprise.
Yeah. Absolutely. Go for it.
Yeah, I think that's it. But I'm going, you know, Colin, I'm going here through some of your background, right? You obviously, you know, founded the podcast host in 2011. You earned a doctorate in 2015 for research into online education. You launched Alitu in 2018, right? A web app designed to simplify the podcast creation process by automating technical tasks. And I think like that's probably one of the main things I really want to go on. But you know, we're also like very money positive here in the show, and we really want to show a path for people to be like, okay, how do I actually connect the content to the profit of my business and different things? So you've been creating for so long, right? Well, in my eyes, I'm so long. Maybe somebody else is like, that's 14 years.
14 years is quite a long time.
And so if you've actually put out a lot of information out there, so maybe can you share a little bit of maybe what are some of the lessons or like connection points from that content to your business, right? Maybe even if you want to share like how much it has generated, maybe just on Alitu or something else that you did before, because I'm guessing you probably did something beforehand, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm happy to share any of the details. Yeah, for sure. So just anything you want to know, specifics, just let me know. But I mean, yeah, potentially maybe the most interesting part of that then is the early days where, like you say, started blogging in 2011. I was still working full time at the university at the time. So that's how I got into podcasting. I was teaching lecturers how to use technology to teach students. So I really enjoyed that job. I got to mess around with all sorts of different stuff. And podcasting was one of the interesting new technologies that came up back then. That was actually around 2007, 2008, I first started learning it. And it was in 2011, I started turning that into something of my own, like just what I was learning, reading about mics and mixers and growth and monetization, all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't till approximately, about 2 years, I think. I remember looking back not that long ago, launched the blog in 2011. And it wasn't until about 2013 that I got my first penny from it. And it was actually just a check came through from Amazon, like $50, I think that was their minimum at the time. So this just pops through the letterbox 2 years after I started writing the first blog post. And I'm like, wait a minute, this can actually make a few pence. And that just grew over time. Like the next year, the next 2 years, that went up to, I think by the time I turned it into a full-time business in 2015, the site was earning about £3,000 to £4,000. So $5,000-ish, $6,000 a month in affiliate revenue. And really that was the kernel for the whole business, was that affiliate affiliate revenue because that let me go full time on it. And then it let me hire alongside actually some lucky enough to get some grant money from our local government too that kind of matched some of that to hire another person too. And that's where we went from there. That was how it kind of took off at that point.
That's so cool. And thanks for sharing those timelines, right? Because a lot of people, I think they come in into content with maybe different expectations, right?
Yeah.
Especially in podcasting, right? Like, hey, yeah, we're going to be famous or we're going to get all these views and then we're going to get sponsors and different things. So you took the route of obviously, can you walk us through your content map, right? You started blogging, right? And I'm assuming some kind of podcasting as well at that point. Was it all affiliate content? Like how many times a week were you doing this stuff? Like how were you sustaining this map?
Yeah, I was only blogging once a week or so. Probably not even that often. Those early years, like 2012, 2013, maybe getting out at least a couple a month. So maybe bi-weekly, because it was just a part-time, a hobby thing, really, back then. And like I said, as soon as that money started coming in, though, I was like, oh, maybe I should take this a bit more seriously. And I remember going through a period not long after that. I must have only been at like a few hundred potentially per month in affiliate income, where I thought, I'm going to just write a blog post every day for a month and see what happens from there. So I spent a month doing a post every single day, just weekdays. So it was like 20 posts, I think, over a month. And that was the game changer, actually, because in most niches, I think, with content, the vast majority, you can cover like 90+% of the search traffic for that niche in like the top 20 questions. So even less usually the top like 5-10 questions actually cover 90+% of the traffic in that niche. So with podcasting, it was always like, how do I start a podcast? How do I record a podcast? What's the best microphone? So there's those searches alone were actually like probably 3/4 of all the searches in podcasting for that key term. So that month of blogging actually let me tackle pretty much all of the searches I needed to. And from there, I built on that, really building out services and education and try to think really about how to monetize it from that point. That made the big difference.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I'm curious if you were to start today, right? Or you were already kind of like on a little bit of a flow today. Yeah. Would you do the same exact thing or would you do it through a different medium? Because I feel like now competition is bigger, right? A lot of people are into it. Obviously, content, I would say, is mainstream on the sense of, when people think about marketing, they think about content creation, whether that is Reels, SEO, whatever. So I'm curious, what would be, if you were starting today, how would you do that? Or would you do the same?
Well, one of the interesting things I discovered back then was that I was writing about podcasting. So I was writing about an audio medium. I was running podcasts too. I'd run a podcast since 2007. The show we run these days called Podcraft, which is about how to run a podcast. That was the one I started to teach lecturers back then. So that's been going, 16 years? That's a bit mental. But anyway, that show has been going for a while. The interesting thing is, so the blog really was the wide part of the net. People would find us that way because they'd type in a search term, they'd find our content that way. Because people love listening to podcasts, but when they want a quick answer to something, they just type into Google. You're not going to listen to a podcast to get a quick answer to something. But the cool thing was they found us that way. They found our 50, 60 blog posts at the time. And they generally found our podcast in one of those blog posts because I would embed the audio into there. And so they'd end up listening to an episode based on building a bit of trust by reading that blog post. And they're like, all right, I'll give this podcast a chance. And that was what made the difference to turn them from just a casual visitor into actually somebody who followed our work. Yeah. That was the cool thing. Like the podcast was never the volume creator or the money maker necessarily, but it was what turned those casual visitors and captured them and brought them into our ecosystem and made them stick around, come back week after week after week. Yeah. And that's what I believe turned into that affiliate income over time, because that revenue in the early days, it was all recommendations. It was all like, what kind of software should I use for my hosting? What microphone should I use for my recording? And we'd get a bit of commission off those recommendations. We were always very honest and open about the pros and cons. We did everything really fairly. I think we built trust that way. But primarily, it was because of that podcast. They listened to the show. They got to know us, me and Matthew, through our voices on that podcast. And that's why they kept coming back for our recommendations. So like I said, interestingly, the blog was what made us our money because it was through the recommendations people found there. Yeah. But it was definitely the podcast that really built that trust that enabled that. So we're doing this again today. Sorry, go on here, but like I would do that exact same process again, because I think even more so now, that trust, that personality, that humanity is what we need right now to stand out amongst the infinitely more, much bigger volume of written content that's coming out now with AI writing, all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
So now you've got to write, but I think you really need either a podcast, a video, some kind of media behind it to really show that humanity, build that trust behind it to drive people in and make them come back.
Yeah, it's almost like that written content, right? Like we just assume it's going to be a consistent thing across like the industry, right? People just understand that every single business will have that. So then we need to go a level above and be like, okay, what else can we provide as value, or trust building vehicles, right? That people are like, oh, these are actually real people behind this company, and it's not just like a random AI or a faceless brand or a faceless thing. Which on our side, I think that's very valuable.
Yeah, definitely building that trust is at the core of podcasting, right?
Or like Fonzie will say, "Dude, think."
yeah. I'm definitely not a fan. I mean, I know AI has its uses, but when people just use it strictly to just create the content that they're gonna pump out, that's what bothers me. I'm like, dude, if you're a thought leader, think. Put your thoughts out into the world. Your thought. You write down the words. Yeah. Now, I'm pretty curious on throughout 14 years how have you monetized content change? So affiliate at the very beginning, right? And now you also have a software that you're developing, right? And you're selling. What happened in the middle? What changed? Did you, realize value of relationships, partnerships? Did you just created a product? How do you monetize in between?
Yeah. It's been a long and winding journey, to be honest. You're probably the same for you guys. Like you try something, some of it works, some of it doesn't. You throw out the bits that don't. You iterate on the bits that do. All that kind of stuff. I mean, two of the big bits maybe worth sharing are one of the first things we tried was production. So editing. Have you guys ever delved into that world?
Oh yeah, it's exactly
that's the world we live in
right now. Baby.
Perfect, right? So you know this better than anyone. Then that's excellent. So we did that. So in the early days, we wrote all that content. This would be about 2015. We decided, right, we're going to start producing for people. Seems like the obvious way to monetize. We're going to create an agency, be production people, and we took on about 12, 13 clients over about 6 months. So it was plenty of demand. We had people bringing on, and it worked okay for a little while. But the trouble was, it took away from the time we were creating content. Basically, we saw that it was just me and Matthew. So it was two of us working on this. We're both doing a bit of production, a bit of content writing. If I'm honest, both of us just really enjoyed creating the content. And we were making good money out of the affiliate, the sponsorship, all of that kind of stuff. It was hard work doing the production. It's like, you guys know this, I'm sure. Yeah. It's really hard to manage in some ways. There's so much volume. There's like growing it at the same time as actually producing your existing clients, all that kind of stuff. It's a great business for some people, but it wasn't a great business for us. So we abandoned that. Like, what's your experience of it?
Yeah, I think we have mixed feelings when we...
They're not mixed. They're straightforward.
No, I mean, I think... on our side, we owe a lot to the production, right? Because, before we actually launched the production house and the podcasting's platform side, we were spinning our wheels for like 4 years, right? Like it was like a side gig, or how we call it in Venezuela, like killing tigers, right? It's like we will do this little job here and the other job over there, and we will bring some revenue here. And we were working full-time / part-time and then doing this thing on the side, right? So the production and the service was actually what allowed us to do this full time, right? So obviously we owe a lot to it, and there's advantages because you have cash flow kind of flowing in on a monthly basis if you have the right structure and so on. But like you said, as you scale, you have to build these systems of like, okay, how do we produce it? Team members, like there's different pieces to it, right? An account manager that makes sure that every single person is receiving what they requested and more, right? And how can we over deliver and all this stuff? And, and
just in January, we were in this conference and this person was talking on stage and he was saying how he had an experience where sometimes, we weren't able to deliver the results maybe or to the expectations that maybe that client, has, and there's some miscommunication, but then they also over deliver and achieve better results. And in both cases, clients fell off, right? So you lose the client, you win, you lose the client. So to him, it was like, because like they got so many leads that they were like, oh, we're good for the next year or so. We don't need the services anymore type of deal, right? So that was also a light bulb moment for me because we just started to experience something like that where we were crushing all the objectives. We were making sure that everything was consistent. They were very happy with the outcome. And all of a sudden it was like, guys, we are moving on to something different. And I was like, but why? Right. And it's like to the point where it's like, okay, we need to be very, very picky. Like if we're going to pursue this, we're going to be very, very picky on who we allow in our space, who we allow in our company, that so we can provide the best service possible for them and also for us at the end of the day, right? For us, for our team to make sure that so that's why I say like there's mixed in. There's a lot of learning obviously in there, lots of lessons. Yeah. We absolutely adore every single person that is working with us right now. But at the same time, we also have the sight on what's next. Like for you was the software, right? For us, it's like, okay, what's next? And we're in that stage right now.
Yeah, that so resonates. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You've got to choose. It's a privileged position to be in, isn't it? To be able to choose as opposed to, absolutely. You have to do something to pay the bills or whatever. But we were the same. We loved every client we worked with. They were all great. But it was just not the work that we really loved doing. And I saw the option to try and scale, like you're talking about, like take on more team members, take on more people, but it just wasn't the business I wanted to run. And I feel lucky that I was in the position to be able to say no to it because of that. Yeah.
Do you remember at what point of revenue wise, right? Because, we've also shared in our story, and I think a lot of people have followed the steps on the service side because it creates that initial, cash flow. Do you remember at what point for you guys made the switch that it made sense economically, right? Like you said that you guys didn't need the service, but then obviously, developing a software is not easy feat. So do you remember where was that and be like, okay, we have a 6-month runway or we have an 8-month runway. Do you guys seek outside investment? Was all self-financed?
Yeah, what came next? So, I think it was still relatively early days when we quit the production. We were probably at 5-6-ish on the affiliate income at that point, 5,000 or 6,000 still. And we only got the production up to maybe about the same. So we probably got the production up to mid 10th, 5, 6, 7,000-ish, I think, and then cut it. And we kept, if I'm honest, we kept on 2 or 3 people who were the kind of easiest of the clients just to have that little bit of revenue there as a wee extra. They were easy enough to manage. But it was actually education we went into next. So we decided at that point, we love creating courses. We love creating content. So why don't we create some premium content that we can try and sell as well? As an obvious upgrade from the blog. And that's more evergreen, it's more scalable, all that stuff. So that's where we went next, actually, designed what we now call the Podcast Host Academy. We created our launch course, which taught people how to get their podcast out there. We created a set of courses around all sorts of different stuff related to podcasting. And we ended up with a wee ecosystem of, about 12 courses, I think, a community where we had hundreds of people in there, podcasters that were learning from us, and we were learning from them as much, to be honest. It was great. And that was what we did for the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And I think the software came in, so that would have been like 2016 or 2017. And it was about 2017 we started looking at the software. And, that all really came about because of that audience. It was because of readers of our blog, listeners to our podcast, but also that community audience. And just the fact that we got so many questions from all 3 of those areas. We get emails in, we were at like 15 or 20 emails a day coming in from our general blog readers. Yeah. And 12, 13 of those 15 emails would have been like, how do I make editing easier? I hate editing. It takes ages. It's like EQ and compression and all this stuff that I have to learn. It's like, I don't want to be an audio engineer. So I'm like, there's a problem to solve here. So that's when we jumped into that.
That is so interesting. I feel like we are literally following on your footsteps.
Yeah.
Right? we skipped maybe the affiliate part and we went straight into agency work. But literally our thought right now is how do we transition into the educational space, right? We want to build that community. We've done things in the past, right? We have this challenge we call the 45 live. Go 45 days in a row live on Facebook. And the third time we did it, well, actually not just live on Facebook, live, whatever you want to go. We did it on Facebook when we did it. And the third time we did it, we decided to bring people on and do it, with that community. We thought it would be fun. And actually it evolved. We had about 100 people sign on to the challenge. We were doing it for free. Then we just wanted to test the idea. We created like bingo cards with mini challenges, like record a live video live in public, for example, right? And if you did your bingo card, you have opportunity to win certain prizes. We were doing one class every single week for the period of the 45 Live. Like it evolved into a full-fledged thing. And we're like, wow, this was actually really, really fun. Yeah. And we haven't done it again. But we're now thinking that could actually be an educational product, right? Bring people into the challenge to build that consistency. And then if they want to stay in the community, right, in the ecosystem after, we can do so. They can stay. So I'm having a little bit of foresight here. I'm like, well, I guess after that, we're going to have to build our own software.
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, yeah, totally. That's the next step. Was that one of those challenges free or was that a paid thing?
Yeah. So that one that we did was free. We put it out there and we said, like, hey, look, we're going to do the 45 Live again. We shared the story. Yeah. We shared the story a lot. So a lot of people knew what the 45 Live was. But we just wanted more accountability, more community, and we did it for free that one time, which we got plenty of testimonials. So I feel like now we can definitely put a paid plan together, right, to run this.
Yeah. That's a really smart way to go about it, isn't it? You do that as a free challenge, you test out the process, you get some really engaged people in, testimonials, all sorts of referrals. That's how you jump into it. That's great.
Yeah. No, it was born very naturally. It was actually a team member that was like, I'll do it with you guys, but he didn't want to publish. He wanted to go work out for 45 days. And we're like, sounds good. And then we just put a post out there. We're like, hey, we're kind of taking in people that want to do this concept. And that's how it was born. But dude, Colin, thank you for showing kind of like the path right now. On obviously, now you have a software on our site. We have these 6 levers, right, on our content creation process, or how we orient or tell people, what was the easier path for us and the trends that we've seen across the industry with the people that we help, right? So you have, anywhere from like the what do I say to the how do I create it, how do I produce it, right? And obviously you guys with your software, you guys kind of fall into that production mode, right? And we can definitely talk about what the software does, and then distribution, and then monetization, and that's why why the conversation is around that. Now I'm curious now with your software, right? Have you guys evolved into a model of like, you guys still blog, you guys still podcast, you guys get out there, you guys are in events, right? Like a lot of people ignore events for this type of stuff, but it's just crazy. Every time we go to events, everything, grows from there. Are you guys doing paid media? What's the process like?
Do you mean are you talking about the kind of connection between the content and the software?
Correct.
How we grow the software through the content?
I'm assuming the software is the main thing right now, right? Or do you guys still have the community
days,
and kind of,
Yeah, but we still have the rest. So
cool.
we essentially have we actually legally have 2 different companies now. It didn't start this way, but I spun the software out into a separate company, so that we could basically future-proofing, so that we could take a bit of investment in the software alone, so we could sell the software in future potentially. It's more of a planning for exit type of company. That
awesome.
But way down the line potentially. They are technically different things, but we still obviously have a really close, I own them both basically, shareholders in the software, but not the content. So the content still really heavily promotes Alitu, the software. Really, we almost treat it as an affiliate product, like a really closely related affiliate product in the same way. And we still make it really, we're still very careful to keep our content site, the podcast host, quite or very utterly fair and unbiased. So we do mention Alitu a lot, but we always say it's not for this or this type of person. Actually, this competitor is better for this type of use case. And we review all of the competitors, and so we keep I'm really keen on keeping our trust with everyone and never really pushing Alitu just because it's ours. And that's always been important. And we have engineered that in a way through that separate company thing. Relatively separate teams. We all know each other, but it is definitely a different content team to our software and software growth team. So yeah, it's quite separate that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love it. I have a question on the creative process, but I'm not sure before. I don't want to fully do like a full 180 here unless you have some other questions about monetization.
I mean, I think, and then Colin, you see the dynamic where like Fonzie is like the content creative, thinking guy, and then I'm more like the upside. So I've been like consuming a lot of content around customer journey lately, right? I'm like, how do we extend the lifetime value of our customers? Like, and something really interesting I listened to is like, okay, if you have X amount of contacts ahead of time, blog post, your podcast, your, content calls, whatever that is, flip it on the other side once they become customers, right? And it's like, okay, if you have 20 contacts, can we have 20 contacts after they become a customer? And then we start, product marketing and different things. So I think my mind is racing there a little bit, but I want to tackle what Fonzie was saying more on the creative side, and if we have a little bit more time, we can go on there, because I think that's super important, especially if you have a monthly a subscription model, education model, and software like you have.
Quick one on that before we switch over then, just very quickly in terms of how they do link, because there's a really interesting one there that we've been playing with a lot in the last year, which is we've written a bunch of books. Just because we have so much content, we kind of turn some of it into books, and then we write custom books as well, because we quite enjoy them. It's quite cool having books. So we've got one called Finally Start Your Podcast, which we spent a lot of time on last year. Primarily Matthew's job. Matthew's a great writer. He's our real content guy. And we got it all really nicely designed and stuff. So it's actually this beautiful little thing I'm really proud of, actually. Even though I can say that because I had very little to do with it. It was all the team. But this thing now, what you were saying there around our subscription product. So Alitu is on the premium end of the scale. Like, it includes everything you need to podcast. We've made it really custom. We've made it really specific to podcasters. So it costs a bit more. It's $38 a month, but it includes everything. It's actually cheaper than buying them all separately. But that $38 is, it's perceivably on the premium end of the pricing scale. Yeah. So getting people to sign up on a monthly basis to a subscription of that size, we do have a bit of friction. We have a bit of friction getting people to just give it a go and find out that it's worth it. Yeah. So we have been playing a lot with funnels whereby we're giving people our free content first. People find a blog post or a podcast episode or a YouTube video. They get a wee bit of value from us. We send them to another bit of content, another bit of value, and then we show them one of our books. And the book's only maybe $15. So they're like, oh, I'll take that. It's only a one-off payment. It'll give me some value. They'll buy it. Yeah. And then they build more trust because this thing's actually genuinely really good. And then we sell them on our course. We're like, okay, you like that? We've got some video courses, that kind of stuff. And it's a classic model. You've seen this everywhere before. So we upsell them on a $99 course. It's still a one-off purchase, but it's higher price. Yeah. And they're bought in. And we've given them so much value at this point, and it's all, I like to think, really good quality. And that's what then gives them the trust in the software. So even though we're working on a content funnel, like it's the free content to a small tripwire product, to a bigger product, to blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing you've seen everywhere with content. We're tying in subscription-based software as well and finding that that's actually working quite nicely. Yeah, so it's like a way of lowering the barriers to that subscription basis, I think, that really, we can give them a different type of value, but it needs to steer them towards that.
Absolutely. Have you seen an increase in lifetime value of your customer once you started implementing like that pre-software sale, right? Because you see a lot of softwares, like obviously, the one that we're using right now, Riverside, right? They don't have any of that, or at least I'm not aware of it. Right. And then it's almost like a transactional where a competitor comes and be like, hey, we have these other features. I'm like, well, I don't really have a relationship built with Riverside or Squadcast or any of those. Right. So I could just jump around depending on like my objective. But if I have that relationship developed, it's going to be a lot stickier for me to stay with that person, right? Or that company or that software. So once you start implementing that, do you guys see like any difference? Because I think this is really useful, even for people that provide services, to develop that, right? Obviously, we assume that because we're providing the service on a consistent basis, that's like our way to communicate with the client. But the truth is, and we can definitely get better at this, is like, what are the updates that we do along the journey? What are the things that we continue to release and maybe add more value to that relationship, right? And I have to give kudos to Fonzie because he's always thinking things like that. of that nature. So do you guys see a significant difference in your value?
Yeah, it's always hard to tell what actually changes something like LTV because it's such a lagging indicator. Like people have to stick around for a fair amount of time to make a big difference to it. Like our LTV just now on Alitu is about, what was it last time I looked, about £275. So it's like close to a year. Lifetime value. So it's so you need some people to be sticking around a long time to make a difference to it. But it's definitely been going up in the last year or so.
Awesome.
So yeah, we're hopefully. I think that probably is definitely. I think that's a factor certainly. But it's always hard to attribute.
Yeah, and the last thought. Sorry, Fonzie. And I think that's super important, especially for podcasters, right? Because you see. The top 10% is people that publish 12 or more episodes, right? So if you have an average of one episode a week, that's about a year, right? And then people are staying consistent, right? So at that point, I think you're helping them through the entire journey of that growth. And then at that point, they're making the decision if either we continue, right? Or maybe this is not working for us. And then maybe at that point, they need to talk to us and see.
Or maybe like they hire an internal team or something like that. Like I'm sure, like you get to a point. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I love that. And like you said, it's such a lagging indicator. It's, you would have to just test one thing for like a year to see if it actually increases, to like be actually able to pinpoint the increase of lifetime value to that one thing. So definitely a challenging one to measure, but I love that. I love funnels. I love direct response marketing. That's actually our way into entrepreneurship as well. So anytime I see a software and I'm like, ooh, let me go through the purchase process and I see all the upsells and stuff, I'm like, yes. Screenshot, funnel hack. Let me see all this stuff. I love that thing. So thank you for sharing. Now in the creative process, I know we only got here a couple minutes left, but it's difficult to stay consistent for 14 years. It's difficult to stay consistent for 30 days. And for some people, it's difficult to stay consistent for a week, right? So first of all, I'm curious on what process do you have in place, if any, to stay consistent for so long?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that worked really well for us. One was that consistency in the early days, the fact that I took on Matthew relatively early, and the two of us started working together. And that makes a difference, just being accountable to somebody. Even though it was my company, Matthew was technically an employee, I still felt accountable because there was somebody else now working for me. So if there's any way you can engineer that as a content creator, even if you don't employ somebody, whether it's like somebody else that has similar goals and you both say to each other, like, here's my goal for the next 3 months. And it has to be somebody, I think, going through the same experience. I think it has to be somebody with skin in the game that understands it. You can't just go into like a community and say, right, I aim to do 12 blog posts in the next 12 weeks. It just doesn't really have the same effect. I think it has to be a bit more personal than that. So definitely that is one thing. I think the other is that we have always had a real kind of close attention to our time blocking as well. So Matthew and I are both like big fans of Cal Newport, for example, and deep work, that approach. And we've often had time blocking. We've always had time blocking on our calendars, as in a Tuesday morning has nearly always been a podcast recording morning for me for literally 16 years. Wow. Blogging on a Thursday morning. They've moved around a bit over the years, but there's always been a half day for podcast recording, a half day for blog writing every single week at a minimum. Yeah. And there'll probably be more somewhere, but that has always been in the calendar and it's non-negotiable. Yeah. It's not this is only if there's no other fires burning. It's like, this is the fire. This is the thing I need to work on. Like, this is the thing I need to fix, is get a blog post out this week.
Makes sense.
I think so. Yeah, totally. Like, it's just, I think it's really, really important. And the final part of that as well, the third, is I think not a lot of people, or not enough people, put enough work into defining their audience and really figuring out what it is they're solving for their audience. Like, most people just pick a topic, like, I want to talk about podcasting, or I want to talk about content, or I want to talk about cycling, something like that. And then they just start talking about it from their own point of view. But it really changes your motivation. It really changes the ideas you have. It really changes your feeling of satisfaction when you get a piece of content out into the world, when you have this really clear, detailed image in your mind of the person you're serving and the problem that person has. Because from then on, your whole job is just to solve that problem for them. That person, that virtual person in your head is asking you questions every day. What are the questions they're asking you about this topic? That's the thing you're going to solve. That's the thing you can write. Ideas come so much more easily. You never run out of content topics. It's so much easier to create content, and it's so more motivational to do it as well when you do that. So spending the time on that is so valuable, but so many people don't bother.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. Two things. First, I'm making a note to myself when we go to Scotland. Do not invite Colin for coffee in the morning, because he's gonna have that time block. Thursdays. he's gonna have that time block. So any other day, we can definitely go grab some coffee with him. And the other thing, I love what you just mentioned. I think that is what we call the golden boulder of the episode, right? The golden boulder, just like a golden nugget, just way bigger. And TM. No kidding. We need to trademark that thing. But it is true, right? Once you have that clarity, it becomes way easier. And I think we experienced that after a few hundred episodes here on the podcast as well, right? Because we're very curious, so we dive into people's stories and all this thing. And, it was very broad, and it was very satisfactory for us to have those conversations. They also help build a rapport with people. But now that we're part of a network and, some of the goals have changed a little bit, we're like, right, maybe we need to pinpoint, change a little bit. I'm here with the idea. But we need to pinpoint the people exactly in their problem that we're trying to solve, right? So as you were saying this, I'm like, we need to change your intro. I have a new one.
That's a really good point. Like, it changes. That's the thing that sometimes stops people doing it. I think actually that they're afraid that they'll kind of lock themselves into, whether it's maybe a small niche audience that they'll never be able to escape from, or whether it's something that they might get sick of. But it changes every 3, 6, 12 months. You can redefine your audience. You can change it a bit. You'll carry along a good proportion of the people that have been listening already. You might lose a few, but that's fine, because you're changing, you're iterating, you're growing. Yeah. So absolutely. But so cool. The worst thing is not to do it at all. You need to actually just do it and then kind of iterate from there.
Yes, that is right. Yeah. Not doing at all is also a decision. You need to make a decision, right? Either create or not create, and not doing anything is a decision. Now, I'm curious, last question for me. I know we're about to wrap up, but, I was listening to your podcast, to Podcraft recently, and I noticed you changed the format a little bit, right? I don't know if this is recent. I don't know if you've done this in the past, but I kind of like scroll down and listen a little bit to the early ones, and you have some solo episodes, some interviews, but I really enjoy what you're doing right now, which is, it kind of reminds me a little bit to The Nudge, right? The podcast. We had the host here on the show as well, and you have conversations with multiple hosts, and then you kind of like have a specific thread that you want to cover for that episode. And it's a mix of narrative with the answers from the interviews that you were doing with them. And I think that's absolutely amazing. Like, the production value in that is great. I think you're covering one topic per episode, which is great. And at the same time, looking at the strategic side of it as a host is allowing you to build multiple relationships per episode that you're putting out there. So I'm a little bit curious on, why did you change from that previous format that you had to this one? If there's any sort of strategy behind it, just strictly you wanted to, try something new in creative ways?
Yeah, it's a good question. I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. We've put a lot of work into it. So it's definitely more work than your average podcast episode. Yep. So I'm glad it's coming across well. It was a decision about 3-4 months ago when Matthew and I were talking about the next season. Podcraft's always been seasonal. So we take a break every couple of months every few months and take a month off and then decide what to do on the next one. We were like, we've done the same old. We're on season 20. We've done the same old for that long. Do you want to do something special this time around? Like for season 20, should we do something different? Matthew has like a real... he's an audio drama guy by background. So he creates these massive soundscapes and like dramatized like epics and stuff like that. Like, that's awesome. So it's almost along the lines of that, like bringing together a narrative, create a story, bringing all these people together. And it wasn't any more work in terms of interviews. So we just interviewed the same kind of number of people we would for a normal season. It's just that we're breaking up their interviews and bringing them into one episode. So the narration's a bit more work. Like I do that separately. We write the script for that, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, really, we wanted to. Do you know what? Can I be a bit immodest for a second? We wanted to show off a bit. Because we've been doing podcasting for ages. Sometimes you just need to actually do a really good job with it, put more work in, polish something up, make something really cool that actually is like a really good product. That was part of it. Yeah. We wanted to just make something really good. And talk to a whole bunch of people doing great podcasting stuff too. That was a big part of it, like bring together all these indie podcasters who are actually doing amazing things, but people don't really talk about it because they're not making tens of millions. They're just like making a really good living, making really good products, going out to tens or hundreds of thousands of listeners. And that was it, really. Yeah, it was just, that was all the thinking. It was,
I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And, thank you for also stepping into your I'm going to call it your greatness right now. So, you know what? Like, we actually wanted to do something great. And you're totally right. You've been doing it for so long. And it gets to a point where you want to be uncopyable, right? In a sense. And I feel like a lot today, with the amount of volume of content that is being published, unfortunately you scroll through social media and you're like, well, it all looks very similar, right? And there's very different. It's very challenging now to differentiate yourself, but a lot of it looks very, very similar. And I remember looking at, one of these days, I don't remember her name. I wish I knew it, but this girl popped up on my Instagram and she was doing an Instagram reel in a very similar way that you guys were doing the podcast, right? She was crafting a narrative around an idea and pulling in sources in between to kind of like prove her point. But at the same time, she was sharing her own expertise and positioning herself, as the expert. And I was like, this is amazing. This is very different. This is uncopyable. I haven't seen anybody do something like this. It takes work to put something like this together. So most people are not going to do the work to copy that thing. And I think that's what your episode reminded me. I started listening to it. I was like, wow, like this is epic. I was like, do they do all their episodes like this? This is a lot of work, right? And then I noticed like that you guys changed the format. So I was very curious about that. But yeah, what you guys doing is absolutely amazing. Definitely recommend go check out Podcraft.
Colin, Fonzie has an issue. He doesn't look at the clock whenever we're doing interviews.
Yes, apologize.
He just gets impatient and goes. But as we wrap up the episode, I want to highlight the fact that you guys are creating the content, for the people that you guys actually serve, answering that, but also you guys are doing your own thing, what you want to do. You're not following any other trends. You sat down and you're like, season 20, we're going to be doing something different. And then you actually share with us 3-step process to create content for 14 years. Let's go, right? And it's like the things of being accountable, attention to time blocking, which has been one of the big things for us as well. Working to find your audience, which is really good. And obviously many, many other things that was like very, very specific. And you guys actually show a path to profit from the content. So thank you, Colin, for that. Is there anything else that you want to share with us and the people that listen to the show?
I think the main thing is, I always tell people, is just to get out there and do it and create the content. Like, it's just so much fun. And you build the eyeballs, you get those earballs, you find people that are your tribe, that come along and follow your stuff, that grow to trust you, that become your great fans. And then it does turn into an earning over time. Yeah, that's great.
So good. Fonzie, anything else? No, I'm kidding. No, you can't talk.
Well, I was just going to say thank you, Colin. I appreciate you, for coming over to the show. Absolutely amazing. And one last thing. Next time we see each other, you can definitely come over and say, I've been in your show. And I was like, yes, you have, Colin. Yes, you have.
This time. I'll be right.
Let's go. Guys, with that said, thank you so much for tuning into the Content is Profit podcast. Go ahead and follow the show in your favorite podcasting platform and on social media at BizBrosCo.
That is right. If Colin here help you become more consistent with your content, please don't forget to share this episode. And of course, don't forget to leave a 5-star review. See ya.
Bye, guys.